to go.
Okay. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Public Safety Committee for Tuesday, February 25th. It is 1 o'clock. And welcome everybody. One of our number, Shauna Black, is attending the New York State Association of Counties meeting I was at yesterday. I don't see her on screen, but if she does attend, my ruling as the chair would be that she would be, it's a valid reason to not be here in person, and she would be able to vote. She would not count towards quorum, but we have quorum. So we'll see if she arrives. At any rate, let's jump in. First item is any changes to the agenda. I do have one change I'd like to do, which is that the county administrator's report, this section on departmental goals, I don't know if there's anything else getting reported on, but what I'd like to do is take those goals by department rather than have the county administrator report and then go back to them with each department. So we'll handle that way. Other than that, let's go to public comment. And the first person I have with the blue card is James Smith. Welcome.
Hi, James Smith, paramedic, Ithaca resident. As you know, I was at the county legislature meeting and requested that you consider having the fly cars come into the city to cover the lack of response for 50 dispatch codes that the Ithaca Fire Department started not responding to a couple of years ago. I won't reiterate everything. I tried to give Mr. Kuhl a chance to address that. I thought it was interesting. I think you could see that he brought up nothing that he had done in the past year since I first brought that to all the council people's attention. He said he was strongly in favor of the fly cars coming into the city. I just want to be clear, I'm not in favor of the fly cars coming into the city unless all mutual aid resources have been exhausted. I'm strongly in favor of mutual aid, but I'm here because I think the city has the resources to address them themselves, but they have not just been discussing this with the public. The question for Mr. Kuhl would be, if you want the fly cars to come into the city, should the county have to fund them? Will the city be contributing while at the same time paying the fire department to not respond to these calls? It makes no fiscal sense to me whatsoever. He talked to the new deputy manager of public safety, which I found interesting rather than going to the fire chief. In his job description, there is a generalized comment of public safety, but they've listed nothing as far as the fire department in that concern. Mr. Kuhl raised the question that they were concerned about responding to fires. His question should have been to him. They were responding to fires 2 years ago. This Cayuga Heights Fire Department can do this. The city of Binghamton can do this. You have to have policies in place. Again, thanks for your patience. I don't want to exhaust you on this subject. I think that you know what I'm trying to do. Thank you.
Thank you. And typically we don't respond, but I did want to let you know I anticipate we'll be talking about EMS and ambulance in our discussion of goals for 2025. And also I noted on the report from Department of Emergency Response, I wanted to ask for their view about the codes you were raising. So that'll come up later in the meeting. Thanks. Nathan Cook, welcome.
Thanks, Rich. So my name's Nate Cook. I'm a partner at Klausner Cook, a law firm in town here. And we've been engaged to assist a client up in Collegetown named Collegetown Dispensary because there's 5 illegal dispensaries that are operating within a block of their legal operation. These are located mostly on Eddy Street, on Dryden Road, and on College Ave. And I wrote a letter to Rich John and to Patrick Cool to sort of express, some concerns that we have, and we'd like to engage with the county in terms of figuring out what resources and legal abilities we have to try to shut this off. What we're seeing is not only cannabis sales, but other things as well. So people have come in and said, to the general manager, hey, do you sell mushrooms? Or hey, do you have this? Or hey, do you have that? And the consensus is that most of the sales are to, underage individuals that are going to Cornell. And we don't think that it's, reflective of the sort of public health and wellness and safety that should be appropriate for that community. So I appreciate any insights that you have and look forward to answering any questions.
Thank you. And again, we will be discussing that as a potential area for focus of this committee in 2025. So that'll come up shortly. Next up, Amanda Kirchgessner. There you are, Amanda. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm here today to speak against supporting 6C, mostly because I think $18.5 million isn't nearly enough money to create a successful package to deal with this. But also, we still haven't sorted out the consequences of bail reform. Locally, I'm friends with an individual who was assaulted with a golf club, had to get surgery as a result. The individual who committed the crime was released on their own recognizance, even though there was a vulnerable senior citizen staying in the location where the incident happened, and the assailant lived there also. Maybe we need to look at bail reform and how to actually help law enforcement address this through identifying people who have repeat engagements with the law associated with mental health and often with active drug use dependence. There are legal pathways already to get people into psychiatric stabilization. The bail reform measures seem to have created massive obstacles that allowed for this to happen. I also want to point out we don't have the stabilization space available, as far as I can tell, certainly not locally, to address the need. It's going to cost a lot more than $18.5 million. As much as I'm not a fan of putting folks in jail, talk to a CEO. They will tell you most of the people up there have mental health issues. While they don't want to be on the primary front line of this issue, they are. And instead of building a really crappy building on a really shaky foundation, perhaps we need to start digging at the foundation and looking at maybe choosing another location. I don't know if you catch the metaphor, but yeah. Don't support this. There's not nearly enough money associated for it to be effective. Thank you.
Thank you. And Tylee Magambe, welcome.
Hello, everyone. So I'm here to say let's put a pause on the new, or pushing for the new mental health hygiene law being proposed by Governor Hochul. Being in this work that I'm in, really looking at the root causes of what happens when we don't properly address mental health challenges in our community. And then when something happens, we say this is a larger problem than it is, and so let's medicate people. And I'm not totally against that unless the person is volunteering, but this is involuntary, and I think when we really look at this, we're actually taking steps to go backwards into our history of how mental health institutions, psych wards, behaved prior to, and I think that as we sit here in 2025, and we look at what happened in our past, we say, no, that cannot possibly happen But I think given the current state of things, I think we understand that that possibility is very strong in terms of the damage and the harm that was done in those institutions that then died away, and we replaced it with our carceral system, which is where mental health challenged people are primarily housed. So we have to really look at how do we address the root? And I don't think we're looking at housing, stable housing, which shows that when we have stable housing, when we have a harm reduction model, thinking model in place, I think we better serve our community. Plus this mental health hygiene involuntary law is not, it's not very clear. It's very ambiguous into how this is going to happen. More people are going to have the potential to actually administer, meaning more harm is potential to happen. So I think this really requires a deeper review. I know there are others here locally that are working on proposals. I know at the assembly level there are new proposals being developed. So I would say that if we could just put a pause and really look at how do we see ourselves into the future? Things are changing, and I think the person-centered, healing-centered approach is more holistic approach to serving humanity is what's gonna allow us to advance as a state. And I think that's what we need to be looking at, is how we are bettering humanity, the well-being of humanity in our state. And I think if we address the root causes impacting people's lives and their mental health, we're gonna develop a better solution that's not gonna be about medicalizing a population, but more of how do we provide the care to give them the best life that they can potentially have. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Okay, is there anybody else who wishes to address the committee? I think I have Zach Wynn online, right?
Yep.
Okay. Zach, are you there?
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome.
Thank you very much. My name is Zach Wynn. I live in the city of Ithaca. Members of the Public Safety Committee, I sent you an article I wrote about vandalism to the Tesla charging station off Route 13 by Trader Joe's yesterday. They were covered in swastikas and, quote, "Hail Hitler," unquote, was written on them. I have also forwarded you an article I wrote about a protest on the Ithaca Commons from the 2nd of this month, where an individual was accosted and assaulted. He was shoved and had his phone spiked to the ground by one of the protesters. He has filed a police report. I have sent videos of the incident from the individual as well as a bystander. I have also included an article about an incident that occurred on the first day of classes this year where a statue was vandalized. This follows an incident last year where Day Hall was vandalized with paint and glass was smashed. I believe the defacing of the Tesla chargers to be part of a pattern of vandalism that has to this point been confined to Cornell campus. I have also previously raised the issue of the criminal roadblocks that have been occurring in Ithaca for more than a decade at this point, with people trapped by a mob of masked individuals who utilize intimidation and violence in pursuit of their political goals. Vehicles have been damaged. There has also been attempts by the mob to open the doors of vehicles, one of which occurred not far from the legislature. Video of that incident was included in my email. I believe it would be beneficial for the Public Safety Committee to consider authoring a statement clarifying what is and is not appropriate behavior in regards to roadblocks, vandalism, and protests. Please put forth to the legislature such a clarifying statement that could form the basis for a proclamation on their part. The incident from the 2nd is a testament to the fact that the faction responsible for these protests is intolerant of dissenting views and feels comfortable utilizing violence to attempt to force people out of public spaces. The attack on the GOP office on Route 13 and subsequent roadblock is another primary example of this phenomena. As the hysteria and quote unquote resistance to Trump's second term as president grows, more incidents like the recent assault and vandalism are certain to occur. There will be more roadblocks and street takeovers. Whatever mechanisms are in place to manage these protests are inadequate. Beyond the danger they represent, there's a reputational harm to the community that is cumulative. What is the plan to manage these inevitable civil disturbances? Can anything be said or done by the legislature to discourage future incidents of violence, roadblocks, or criminal vandalism? I would appreciate legislators raising this issue at its next meeting. I believe a categorical denouncement of political violence, vandalism, and roadblocks by the county would be appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to address the committee? Seeing none, thanks to everybody for coming in. Let's jump into our agenda here. And first item is minutes approval from January 28th, 2025. Could I get a motion to put those on the floor? Veronica moves. Dramatic pause. Mike seconds. Thank you. Questions or comments on the minutes? Are we ready to vote? All those in favor? That's unanimous. Great. I have one appointment to the Advisory Board on Indigent Representation, and that is Rich John, legislator. I don't know. Mike moves. Lee seconds.
Rich,
Thank you.
is there anyone else who may want to join that board? We should have 2 legislators on that board.
And remind me, when does that committee, it's bi-monthly, correct?
Bi-monthly on a Wednesday afternoon from roughly 12:15 to 1:15.
Okay. Any takers? Well, today, I will take that on, and we'll see if I can twist arms. Well, I guess I'll take it on if I can get any votes. Further questions or comments about Rich John as a advisory board member? Are we ready to vote? All those in favor? I'm touched there. Next is chair's report, but I know our sheriff has some time constraints. Derek, when do you need to be somewhere else?
We're good until probably, 2 o'clock or so, so we're not in a huge rush.
Okay. Why don't we proceed with chair's report, and then, because I know there's some people who are interested in our priorities and goals. What I'm proposing, though, is to take the county administrator's report, and I think all our county administrators are up in Albany at NISAC, but take the items on page 30 to 34 on each of your individual departments and talk about them in connection with each of your individual reports, just so you know. So why don't we go to chair's report, and I have a few different things here. One is I am inclined to take the advice of one of our speakers, and I will make a comment at our next legislative meeting about appropriate public comment and demonstration, because I do agree that we're unfortunately in an environment where people are really angry, and it's important that we disagree in a way that is safe and respects people that disagree with us. So at any rate, I will speak to that at the next legislative meeting. I did want to give a brief update on the Public Safety Committee from NISAC. In fact, I left stuff in my bag here. Wrong folder.
Anyone got any jokes?
I know, sorry. Here it is. I attended the Public Safety Committee for NISAC, the New York State Association of Counties. Yesterday, we passed 4 resolutions. The first was, there was some change in the law saying that sheriffs and undersheriffs are not, they don't have police powers. And we passed a resolution saying, no, if you're elected as the sheriff or appointed as the undersheriff, you have police powers. And this used to be the law in New York State, and through a change that happened a few years ago, it was removed. And the idea being that obviously you want a sheriff who's elected who has not been serving in law enforcement to get trained, but you don't want to make it a condition of running for office that you already are a police officer. So we passed that resolution. We passed a resolution to increase the medication-assisted treatment budget allocation for county jails. Currently, there's $8.865 million in state aid to localities. It's not nearly enough for what counties are called upon to do in treating people with addiction issues in their jails. And that is a program that we've really pushed here in Tompkins County, and having adequate state support makes sense. We added an amendment to the resolution saying it should be 20 million, not 8.865. We passed a resolution to improve New York State support for probation and alternatives to incarceration. And the statistic that jumps out that in 1990, 46.5% was a state share for probation, and it's to less than 10% in 2024. We passed a resolution that explains why it's really critically important that probation is supported by New York State because of all of the things that New York State is asking our probation departments to do. And I actually proposed an amendment here because there was not an amount requested. And we talked a little bit about what is the appropriate amount to ask for, and nobody was quite sure. So I said, just propose it as a percentage. And what we added was 46.5%. Take it back to 1990, where it was, where New York State had committed to support probation departments. And then finally, we passed a resolution making some technical edits to components of the Raise the Age law. And this is the law pertaining to 16 and 17-year-olds and under, that they can't be held in a jail, and you have the whole system of specialized secure detention with referrals to family court for certain kinds of offenses. The changes that were advocated in this resolution regard gun crimes and some of the more serious offenses regarding burglary and robbery and violent crimes, and saying they should be treated through the district attorney rather than all referred to family court. I learned some stuff about Raise the Age funding. There's been a very large amount of money, nearly $1 billion appropriated, but not distributed. That the money is out there, but it's what's called a dry appropriation, which I'd never heard of before, where the money is put in the budget but not funded. And so it's not clear what has been accomplished at all, but this has really been a sore point for counties because the resources have not been there to properly implement Raise the Age, including having adequate specialized secure detention facilities. They just don't exist. So with the best of intentions, you're putting these youth, basically holding them in improvised facilities at sheriff's offices, not in any kind of adequate place. Let's see. There were a lot of other things. New Paltz has conducted a study of mental health concerns for first responders. I know we have something in our agenda on that. And there's been a real uptick in trauma and mental health problems with first responders. And so there's some information there I have not looked at yet. There was a lot of discussion about EMS and changes to the law, and discussion about, again, trying to get EMS as an essential service and what that would mean. One critical piece of that is that the tax cap is not exempted or would not be exempted if it was created as an essential service, which would mean the counties would need to do something about it, but we would have to do it within our tax cap. And probably we couldn't do it without exceeding the tax cap. There were several other proposals on EMS I won't go into here, but it was a good discussion. There was a long, very emotional discussion about the state prison crisis, where there's the corrections officers are on strike. And inside the room of the Public Safety Committee, it seemed to be very supportive of the corrections officers. I know there's two sides to that story, but they did indicate that over the last couple of years, there's been a 70% increase in assaults on corrections officers, and they're about 2,200 correction officers short across the state. So there's real problems there. I'm not sure what the right answer is to do anything about it, but all that came out in the Public Safety Committee, so I wanted to just give you that, and I'm happy to provide more detail to anybody who's interested. Mike?
I mean, did the use of National Guard to kind of undercut the corrections officers come up at all?
It did, and they said, they understood that the governor had to do something. You can't just not have people there, but that the National Guard really isn't trained to do that job, and that is a very imperfect solution. And I think nobody's disagreeing with that. Yeah. Anything other? All right. Veronica.
Sorry, I should know this by now, but when we talk about the possibility of EMS being declared an essential service in New York, one of the issues that comes up is whether it would be the responsibility of counties or of municipalities. Is that something that is determined in the proposal to declare it an essential service, or is that just a thing that has to shake out on its own, the different locations?
I'm not sure it is determined, but as a practical matter, if it was declared an essential service, I don't know how it would be done at the town level. But Lee, I'd like to get your opinion on that.
Legislation I saw last year was ambiguous, but it did basically approach it from a collaborative approach across all levels of government, county on down. And I'm not sure that's where it remains today, but it was not clear in that as to who was being signed the responsibility. In fact, I think it basically said there had to be a county-led plan to determine how the services would be provided.
Yeah. One of the proposals that the legislative lays and was talking about was a proposal to set up joint municipal taxing jurisdictions for EMS, that it could be countywide, it could be partial county, and figure out where the benefit is and tax on that basis. And that he seemed to indicate that has some chance of actually passing this year. So we'll see. I think it is in the category of be careful what you wish for, which we might bring up again when we're talking about involuntary treatment. But if I were to try to read the tea leaves, I think it's coming that the counties are going to have to do something about ambulance service, that we're not going to be able to just do it on a voluntary basis. I think some assignment will be given to counties to help try to solve it.
One thing I'd request, Rich, maybe I think we keep referring to ambulance service. Maybe it should be just broadly referred
you're
to
right.
as
You're
emergency
right.
medical services.
EMS, but
it has different connotations.
It does.
Talk in that direction.
And we'll revisit this when we're talking about priorities. But boy, the writing is on the wall that something is coming. I think it has to. So maybe not. Maybe it just doesn't. I don't know how we maintain services that we want without the counties stepping in in some way. But more to know there. Other comments?
I had one other question with the thing about whether sheriffs and undersheriffs do or don't have police powers. That seems weird. Has that affected anything in practice here?
Well, no, because both Jen and Derek are already law enforcement officers when they were appointed and elected. But in some counties, that's not the case. And in fact, the vice chair of the Public Safety Committee has been a military officer, a National Guard, a deputy, a sheriff, and then he went into New York State government, and suddenly he's not qualified.
And to be clear, you mean the NISAC committee, not the vice chair of this Public Safety Committee.
Right.
Or else there's a lot to learn about Shauna.
Yeah. And so he was saying, it makes no sense at all. I mean, you need to be able to lead officers. But I guess I'd be very happy to hear from Derek or Jen if you have a different view on that one. But it was unanimous in the room.
No, this, to my knowledge, this has come up periodically over many years from time to time, and it has to do with sheriffs getting elected with no law enforcement experience. And it doesn't apply really to Jen and myself, and we've had no issues with that.
Okay. All right. Let's see. I'm looking in our agenda here. Let's go to page 13. And this is Public Safety Standing Committee goals and priorities. And if we can just spend a little bit of time looking at these. And again, I took a crack at it, and I'm going to have one added starter, as they say in horse racing, at the end. But the first one I had was monitor the capital program at the jail to address needed upgrades. And I would like to see us make sure this process is moving through the Facilities and Infrastructure Committee so that we don't lose the momentum we've built on addressing next steps in jail planning and construction. But
I'll take that back. How
What's that?
so? I'll take that back to the F&I committee, but how so would you like to?
just make sure that it is proceeding there. I think the timeline was that there would be some planning activity happening this year. I don't think there was any planned construction, and I wasn't casting any aspersions on facilities and infrastructure,
Right.
just that public safety didn't ignore this issue because we agreed we would be working on this. So that's why I put that one in, but it doesn't have to be there. You guys tell me.
No, I think it needs to be a continued area of attention, and I've advocated for 3 years that as we're looking at other major capital projects that they should be kept in the mix.
And I think maintaining it as a priority basically means we hear from facilities and infrastructure at some point what's going on. So, okay. The next one is monitor the rapid medical.
Oh, sorry, could I ask a question about that? Which the monitoring the capital program at the jail was a goal of this committee this year, right?
That was for the
Or this?
the upgrades that happened. This would be for the next stage.
Oh, okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, I remembered wrong.
Okay. Monitor the rapid medical response program and consider further actions. And I added that phrase at the end, and consider further actions, that I think we should start to have some conversations about what those might look like for if the county does need to take further steps in EMS or ambulance or both. What are the options? You know, certainly the legislature may make some changes to our ability to set up taxing jurisdictions. But I think we should be looking at this because it does seem to be a continuing problem across the state. I think we've done some good stuff here to address it, but I don't think we've solved it. Mike?
I mean, not to sound like somebody who's been on the legislature a long time, but my concern with doing this and getting out ahead of it is a lot of times Tompkins County is out ahead of something and then the state says, hey, we should do this. And then they pay for it and we're like, damn, just, you know what I'm saying?
I do know what you're saying.
Just a little note of caution, because it, when we tried to do that whole, under Joe Mariano, we pulled all these things together that we were gonna consolidate, because the state really wanted that, us to consolidate things. And we were like, wow, we've already done like half the list. So it was an interesting process, because we were so far out ahead of people. But
Well, I know we were then trying to find things where we could.
we were.
Yes, we had gotten all our low-hanging fruit. Yeah, and I think this is something, a subject where you want to be exceedingly careful where you step in. I know Lee disagrees. He wants to just jump in with both feet. But I put it in because I thought it was a worthy thing for us to spend a little bit of time thinking about. And certainly, you know, the issue of how are the systems working together is an issue that we heard about on public comment even today. You know, and are we coordinating the right way? Are we getting the coverage the way we should?
I'm okay with the discussion, but I really think it's got to be broadened to understand what some of the driving stressors are. And a lot of it has to do with the healthcare system itself and the inability to handle the types and amounts of responses that are going on. your emergency rooms are loaded. They've become the destination of first choice rather than last choice. You've got a huge amount of issues with mental health, substance abuse, elderly trying to sustain themselves in their homes. There's a lot of stuff going on there that by consequence or default EMS in the emergency room, they're having to deal with it. And that's a lot of what's causing the higher volumes and slower responses. And so in talking about it, I think you have to look at the broader thing. The other thing is where are we going to be finding the responders even to maintain what we're doing today? And the numbers are not encouraging, and simply redistributing assets across the county is not the direction that I would be headed toward. But there are those that are advocating to do that, and I think you would find that entirely crashes the system.
Yeah, well, certainly I'm pleased that we've pushed a couple cohorts through for new EMS people, and I assume we may even get a report on that. I think there's a cohort that's mid-program right now, but Joe can correct me on that. Okay, but in terms of a priority, you'd say we probably should talk about this a bit.
We've made an investment, and it's going to come back from a fiscal standpoint. Yeah, we need to stay on top of it.
Okay, Veronica.
Two things. One, Lee, sorry I missed it. What was the proposal that you said would crash the system possibly?
Back when we were doing the emergency medical, back when we were doing the emergency medical services task force a few years ago, before that met its demise, there were certain advocates for going to a countywide ambulance service, dropping the volunteer component entirely, and taking what resources were out there and just drawing circles, and it was not a practical approach. But in the name of equity, they thought that was a direction that we should be headed in. And it really, to me, it amounted to a diminishment of strong response to 90% to try to raise response to 10%. And I think there's other ways to go at it, but also left to be discussed or not pursued were all of these different aspects of what are causing the huge increases in volumes that are a broader community problem. Broader industry problem, broader healthcare problem.
Right. So thank you. And related to that, I would find it helpful on this topic to, I guess, learn more or have a like system review or map, if only everything could be a flow chart of like the EMS and related systems we have in the county and the various challenges and stressors. And I'm not phrasing this as a specific request because I don't know who would make that, not me. But work putting something like that together or simply communicating it to this community if it's already been done, I think would be really helpful. And more simply on this topic, I think it would be great if someone could make a glossary of EMS related terms so we're not mixing up ambulances and EMS generally and fly car and all sorts of things.
I think that's a good idea. But it sounds like the consensus is this is a worthy thing to spend some time on in 2025. Okay. Yeah. And when we get to it, we'd be very happy to have you as a guest, Mr. Smith, to come talk to us about your view. Okay. Next one, monitor the implementation of the new detox and stabilization capabilities for people experiencing addiction and/or mental health crisis. And this one is entirely a carryover from last year because we thought we were going to get it up and running, and we're still waiting, I believe. So I think we want to see that realized, and we should be paying some real attention to what it's going to take to get the doors open. Yes?
Is Health and Human Services looking at this area too?
I would assume so. This is something where we've had a joint meeting, and maybe that's something we could do this year or think about as a joint meeting with Health and Human Services to talk about this particular topic. So, okay. And then I have monitor the gun-involved violence elimination grant program. This is continuing. It seems to have made some real change. This year, it seems like we're poised to get a lot of cameras in place and the license plate readers actually operating and moving that along. And I'd be very interested in seeing how that progresses. But does this make sense as a priority to get a report on? Okay. And then the next one I had on there was evaluate progress on efforts to enforce the cannabis control law. There it is. You know, this I find a little bit infuriating in that it seems entirely reasonable that New York State finally revised its laws to be far more rational, I think, in regard to marijuana. But the lack of a coherent implementation of those rules across the state has led to a lot of illegal marijuana sales and people selling a lot of other drugs and unregulated drugs. I think we, in some ways, have made the situation far worse because now it's okay and yet it's not regulated. And that was the trade-off. It's going to be legal, but it's going to be regulated. And there's going to be some tax revenue. And we've gotten very limited tax revenue so far. Mike.
I have to admit, I had always thought we were further along with this. I for some reason, had thought that the Sheriff's Department had agreed that they would close certain shops that were illegal, but that they were kind of waiting on us, the legislature, to kind of pass something. And I think the legislature, I had thought were kind of, I don't know who was writing that, but I thought we were waiting on kind of something that put that into code. And if the sheriff wants to correct me on that, please do. But I had thought that the sheriff was waiting on us to move some legislation on it.
Okay, well, we can hear from the sheriff, but I see Lance has his hand up. Go ahead, Lance.
Rich, just a couple of things to give you some background here. Most of the, as I'm aware from interacting with some of the staff owners of some of these places, most of the clientele of these, should we say, off-record shops, or however you want to, the unlicensed shops, tend to be, well, like College Town sounds like a specific issue of underage college students that's easy to address, but a lot of the other ones they're addressing, well, probably my client base. It's, you know, a lot of people that we service don't go, for instance, if you use William Jane, their clientele tends to be students and professionals. The RFY, they producing money, they made a big donation to the Southside Community Center. I'm not sure how they did that, but I know I think your main issue is enforcement in the city in terms of these illegitimate shops. The state is doing a little work. They've shut down, there was a place on the Commons, they hit them twice, I know of because I've seen them. But I think it's a little limited. But the kind of client, so they're these unlicensed shops are basically serving a different market, or they're on the Commons, they're providing, as the guest said, they're providing other alternative consumables, mushrooms, other things on that. So I think my sense is the squeaky wheel may get the attention from the state, but I wanted to give you a little background on who's kind of going to these shops for the most part. But it is undercutting sales tax collection. But but a lot of it, you know, I can think of a couple locations I know. They're serving, I say my client, they're serving a lot of my clients wouldn't go, we have at assigned counsel that are in trouble, that have addiction issues and stuff. They don't go to the licensed dispensaries, they go elsewhere. So that's part of the issue. I just wanted to kind of throw that out there and give you a little more information on what's happening.
Yeah, thank you, Lance. I would just add, we're also hurting our local agricultural community in that some farmers have gone to a lot of effort to be properly licensed to do this. And what they're competing with is marijuana products from other states, and a lot of it unregulated, some mixed with other drugs, and you don't know what the pesticides are and whatever else. There's injustice in a lot of different directions here. And I don't know that I guess we should think a little bit about what population might be buying from illegal shops versus legal shops, but I don't know that should be a real driver. We shouldn't have illegal sales, is in my mind. But Sheriff, did you have anything you wanted to add on this one?
Yeah, I can just say, Rich, we had a meeting with county administration and the county attorney several months ago, maybe even as long ago as 6 months ago, and IPD, including this issue. And my understanding was there was going to be a resolution worked on or some kind of law enacted that we could work on jointly with the city. I don't know the status of that offhand. But as far as the sheriff's office shutting down these illegal businesses in the city, that was never discussed. I believe that would fall on the Ithaca Police Department. And as far as I know, there's none currently outside the city in the county of Tompkins, at least to my knowledge.
Okay. Well, there's a legal dispensary in Dryden, right? But
the only one I know of is the one out in Newfield. That's where Ithaca Rec used to be.
Okay.
Not Ithaca.
Yeah, no, I think there was some action taken there. I'm not sure that's still running illegally, but I could certainly check on that.
Okay. Well, I think this should be an area of focus for us this year, but I'd welcome comment.
What was it, a topic at NISAC?
It didn't come up at the Public Safety Committee.
It has in the past. I'm just.
Yeah. I think people were so angry about the prison strike. It sort of ate up a lot of time at the meeting. But so anyway, I would like to keep this in, but if anybody has strong feelings the other way. The other topic that I didn't put in here and I thought of later was our jail numbers have gone up. Back in December of 23, I think it was roughly, the numbers kind of went up to a new normal around 60. And we've been roughly staying there since then. And it would be very interesting to me to understand why, and maybe talk to some of the judges about what ATI programs they're using and which ones they're not using, and try to get a handle on, is that the truly organic number we should be at, or is there something further we could be doing in reassessing our ATIs to bring that to a different, lower number? Matt, I see your hand up.
I'm going to stay off camera because I got carved up by the dermatologist today, so you don't want to see me. But I think it's a combination of factors that contribute to the higher jail numbers. One of them is the fact that despite the fact that we have 3 county court judges, it's becoming very, very difficult to get to a trial date. And it just seems that there's at least one judge who is his calendar is exceedingly delayed and drawn out, protracted, and it's frustrating for us because we want to try the cases. Another factor is that I think the GIVE program has resulted in higher level charges, people who have gun charges, people who have violent charges being arrested, and there is a significant percentage of the individuals who are, on the top 10 list of threats to the community. They're in jail now, and they're waiting for trials, or they're dragging their cases out, and that has accumulated into a higher number in the jail.
Okay, that's helpful.
And there's also a large number of people who are there for psychiatric holds who are either in our jail waiting for a bed in a psych facility or at a psych facility, but still part of our numbers.
Okay. I mean, it's an interesting thing, and if the people in our jail, worked hard and earned the right to be there, then they should be there. But I'd like to know that, and so that's why I thought that might be a worthy area for us to spend some time and learn about. Jen, I see your hand up.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to reiterate one of Matt's points is, and I know it will be brought up at CJATI tomorrow, which I believe you sit on, is right now we have 15 long-term unsentenced inmates in our jail, which is extremely high for us. So I think that is also, to Matt's point, driving up the numbers.
Okay. I would like to understand that better, but I'd like to hear from the rest of the committee. Do you think that's something we should explore a bit? I mean, that is, we were running at 40 for a while, pretty consistently, and we have crept up. And if we're holding people in our jail, I feel we should know that that fits with our policy of what we want to try to do in public safety in the community, rather than it just sort of being just slow growth. That's the default. But tell me.
Well, it certainly factors in with the previous discussion about looking at a long-term jail solution.
Yeah, it does. It does.
How do you begin to evaluate the size if you don't know what the trends are and where you think they're going to go? And the other question I just have is, how does the current 60-some compare to pre-pandemic levels? Is it returning to the status that maybe we were at before, or is it
a little bit higher, I think? Not a lot higher, but a little bit. When we really went through and looked at our ATIs and instituted them and fully funded them, we drove down into the 40s pretty consistently. And then we went through the pandemic where we were down in the teens. We had, remarkable numbers then, but for other reasons. But since we've kind of returned to normal, you look at the graph from the beginning of 23 and it just sort of moved up. And maybe it's might be something else, might be, I'd like to understand the factors that are going into this. Might be judges are just sort of treating cases differently. It could be, as Matt says, time, to get to trial. I don't know. I mean, some of these things may not be in our control, but I'd like to try to understand them. Any other priorities you think I forgot that you think we should really be looking at? Mike?
Should we be at all concerned that, it's the state correction officers who are striking, but could that filter down to the county COs?
That was a subject of discussion at the NISAC meeting, where they said, absolutely, this will have impacts at the jails, because it looks like the state prisons are in a crisis that could push the state to really make it harder to take people into the state prison system, meaning there would be more at the local jails. And we are very fortunate in having full staffing at our jail, but it sounds like most of the county jails across the state are really struggling with staffing. So this is a potential crisis in the making for I think other jails more than ours, but perhaps here too. And Sheriff, I see your hand up. And then Dan.
Thanks, Rich. I was going to add it in my report, but since it came up, currently we have 2 state readies that we're holding because the state prisons can't take inmates right now. We anticipate that number may go up slightly, but again, our capacity is roughly 82. So hovering in the mid-60s, we should be okay, but we will be holding state readies a little bit longer, and that will make the numbers look a little higher as well.
All right. Do you think there's a possibility, Sheriff, that there'd be board-ins from the state, that they would ask us to start taking
They've asked for cooperation in that regard. I haven't bid on that right now. It does come with some reimbursement, and we will get reimbursed for the ones we're forced to hold now at some point. I haven't jumped on it. I don't think it's something I'm really looking to get into because, you know, our capacity isn't huge. I think we'd better off unless it absolutely becomes a requirement. I'd prefer to stay away from it.
Okay. Yeah. Dan?
I just wanted to point out, in addition to the creep in the jail numbers, probation supervision numbers for adult criminal court cases hit a low since the pandemic. In September of 2022, 386 clients, and we're just shy of 500 adult criminal court clients now. So it is, the numbers on probation are also creeping up.
Does that match pre-pandemic?
June of 2020, we're at 519. May of 2020, 521. April 2020, 529. So the numbers did go down at the beginning of the pandemic, and it looks like they're rebounding back in the direction of pre-pandemic.
Okay. Well, I'm thinking of adding a section on this as an area of focus. No objection? Okay. And I didn't hear anybody with any other proposed areas we should look at? Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. And then we have on Chair's report a resolution. And this is a resolution in support of Governor Hochul's proposals to amend the mental hygiene law regarding involuntary treatment, Doc ID 13132. Could I get a motion on that? Mike moves, Lee seconds. You know, I think we had a pretty good discussion about this last month, and as a result, I put this draft resolution together. And I have read Veronica's proposed resolution. I think there's lots of questions that this raises in terms of how would it ever be implemented? How would it be paid for? You know, how do we move forward with this? But I don't see that we move forward at all without some sort of change in the mental hygiene law. It is too restrictive as currently written. And this is what I've heard from the DSS attorneys, that you can't really use the mental hygiene law the way you want to help people. I think that if this was adopted and we did have more power to use involuntary treatment, it would have to be really carefully implemented and run, because there's lots of ways to do it wrong. But as one of the public comment speakers indicated, you know, we're essentially using our jail as the repository. And I feel like we've gotten past that argument that the jail is not the place for mental health treatment. We can't expect to get very good outcomes if that's our landing place. And the current structure for people who end up going to Cayuga Medical Center is they tend to cycle through. They don't stay because they get stabilized and then released, and there is no longer term ability to help them. I think that this is a first step on a much longer path to try to get a coherent system that recognizes what we were trying to do as a country in the 1970s with the deinstitutionalization movement, where we closed the mental health hospitals with the idea that people would be treated locally. And I don't see a great outcome if this goes forward and we just rebuild the state mental health hospitals. I think that what we want is more local capacity. And that would be the next step, is to lobby New York State to say, help us do this for our people here. But the current environment doesn't seem to get us anywhere near that. So I will support the resolution I drafted. I'd love to hear. Veronica.
So you know I have a bunch of objections.
You do.
but-
I'm going to get some water, but I'm listening.
Oh, well, so I want to ask you a question, though, is I'm not following the logic that goes, the current options of where to send or invite people in crisis are not enough, which I agree with, and don't lead to long-term stabilization, which I agree with, and we should lobby the state for more resources to provide long-term supportive stabilizing services to our community members here in the county, which I agree with. But Hochul's proposal to change the involuntary commitment criteria to expand them doesn't help with long-term stabilization either. I don't see why that's your choice of what to support, because I don't see how it addresses any of the problems that I agree with you that you identified. And I guess that's the core reason that's half the reason that I oppose this, and the other half is I think it will actually make things worse. It's a legalizing of, even if you don't mean it to be used this way, it's a legalizing of swooping people up off the streets because you don't like how they're living.
I guess if I could respond to that, as I said, I think there's lots of ways you could really do this wrong. But Tompkins County, I believe, has approached a lot of these issues in a very responsible way. And I'd point to ATIs as an example, that we did ATIs before New York State did bail reform, and essentially required a different approach. And I think we did it responsibly and in line with a core philosophy of trying to do the minimum amount of control of individuals necessary to ensure public safety, and that's ATIs. I have some confidence that Tompkins County could also do something similar here, that the involuntary treatment would be for a very small segment of the population. It should be. It shouldn't be broadly used, certainly it shouldn't be misused, but right now, it seems like if we're serious about addressing root causes of homelessness and true harm reduction, we're not doing that. That we're taking people with severe mental illness and drug addiction, and we're saying, here's a blanket, and here's some food. We are not addressing it in any coherent risk management model where you look at severity, you look at likelihood, and you look at frequency of exposure to the harm. Harm reduction doesn't do any of that. It shouldn't really even use that term in my mind, because it is not a true risk management model. You want to address the root causes, and if you can't address the root causes, you address the contributing factors. For a very small segment of our population, involuntary treatment is probably the only way to address the root cause. And that's why I think you need to have that tool in the toolbox.
What do you think the root causes are in those cases?
I think they're addicted. I think once somebody becomes addicted to this new class of drugs, the fentanyl, the xylazine, the methamphetamine, they're so powerful, people cannot, realistically stop using them. And, I'm trying to remember Carrie Blankinger, is that the name? Her book? I spoke with her about her book.
She just got nominated for an Oscar, by the way.
Really?
Look it up. Yeah.
Okay. I spoke with her, and I said it was ironic to me in a way that for her, arrest probably made a huge difference. And she said, no, I could get drugs in jail, but I think I just kind of got to a point I was through with that. Maybe. But I think for her, it was the involuntary element of it. I think she would have continued on for far longer and could well have died, from an overdose because of frequency of exposure. Everybody's pathway is different, but for some people, I don't see that they can ever get help. And they're just going to be out in the jungle and they're going to die. And we shouldn't say that's harm reduction.
So I appreciate Carrie Blakinger's story because it's a book we can all read whose title escapes me at the moment. But she was arrested for criminal charges. So what you're proposing supporting here, what the governor's proposing, really has nothing to do with her situation.
It would allow some government functions to address helping people before they enter the criminal justice system. Yes, it would.
But how do you know they're helping people? And you mentioned, so, or I feel I'm going on two paths here, I guess, but the one about root causes, you said it's people who are addicted to drugs, but is there a root cause of that? Like how do people get addicted to things?
I think for a lot of them, it's mental health issues where they're self-medicating. But Mike, you had a...
I'll run through a couple things. I mean, I just find myself agreeing much more with Rich on this issue. I think Tompkins County has done some very good things. The mental health stabilization unit that we were able to get through, I do. That's why I'm so glad that's a goal of ours, because it's like, where are we now with that? And we should have a meeting with the hospital and say, where are we with that? Not that they're dragging their feet or anything, they've got a lot going on. But I am interested. I mean, they have the building. How are we looking at staffing, things like that? The fact that they were able to get that together with the detox is just a huge piece of it, I think. And the fact that every county doesn't have that, I think is problematic for the state. When somebody wants to go to detox, they generally make that decision very quickly, and you need to get them there very quickly, has been my experience anyway with that. And the mental health stabilization unit, sure, we're going to be picking somebody up for a crime, but that's such a better place to take them than our jail. So I think we are doing the things that need to be done, and I kind of see this as a next step. And I'll get back to that in a second. I just wanted to mention this too, though. This idea that we're going to lobby the state for more money to pay for these things, I think that's great. It's something we should always do. I think we also have to accept the fact that the state may not want to do that, and we have to do it anyway. That it's probably, county taxpayers will probably foot part of this bill, and we have to be honest with our taxpayers and say, these people you're your neighbors. Some of these are your parents, your children, and yes, we need to go and help them. Now, what does that entail, I think, is this, and it is somewhat philosophical. I don't think that somebody who's on fentanyl, the new class, as you would say, has a choice. I think they've been robbed of that choice, to be honest with you. The drug now is making those choices. And until you can get them to a place where they can actually make the choice of which direction do you want to go with your life, what do you want to happen here, then there is no choice. They're going to pick the drugs because the drugs are just better. Even the marijuana today is not the marijuana of the 1970s. I mean, I talked to Frank Krupa once. We were talking about fentanyl testing strips, and that's all well and good, except the fact that every street drug now has fentanyl in it. He was like, every one. And I don't know if that's still the case, but at that particular point in time, it was. And, I guess, it's like telling your kids when they go to college, listen, don't take any pills, because you don't have any idea what's in that pill. And I keep reading stories about kids, one pill and you're dead. There's a whole ad campaign for that now. So that's how I look at it. And so when you ask, will we just be picking people up and putting them, we're not putting them in jail. Yes, it's involuntary because, you are not of the right mind to kind of make that choice. Now, if you come out of it and you say, yeah, I want to keep doing drugs, I don't really know what to do for that person. That may be somebody that you're going to say, okay, well, you probably aren't going to be around in 6 months. I do take notice of what folks were saying about the hospitals, that we don't want to go back to 1970. I think the chances of that are lower than most people. I think people know one flew over the cuckoo's nest. I mean, not this generation maybe, but people my age do.
Hey, I've
and
read
shock therapy and, you look back at that, lobotomies, you're like, oh my God, I can't believe people did that at some point. So no, I think we've made a lot of progress in the mental health field. That's, we won't be stepping back, but I've said that about other things and we do them anyway, so. But no, I mean, I would like to see more, our mental health stabilization unit. If that were to one day lead to a mental health hospital, I wouldn't be opposed to that. I mean, obviously, I think that's something that mental health, we don't see it, so we don't, I think that's still the case. You don't see it, so you don't think it's a thing, whereas if somebody loses an arm, you see it, so you're like, oh. But anyway, like I said, I think it's a little philosophical, but I would like to give people that choice, and I think sometimes the only way to do that is to get them off of drugs as quickly as possible. So that's it. Thanks.
More comment. Veronica.
It's a little bit the same comment, but I still don't see how, well, you mentioned the crisis stabilization unit and detox facility that we're hopefully getting, which is great. We don't have it yet. So if we had the power to send more people to it, that doesn't help anything. And what you said about like after someone's crisis treatment, if they just go back on drugs, then I don't know what to do. The governor's proposals won't help that. I think there are, every individual is different. There's lots of research and expertise. I don't have the expertise into what can support people getting off drugs, if that's what they want, if that's what's helpful, or at least staying alive until they get to a place where they're like, yeah, I'm committed to like getting sober or quitting using this one substance or whatever. We don't have that kind of a robust system. We have people voluntarily seeking mental health treatment and like substance use disorder treatment who can't get it. And so I don't know, you all are talking about the expanding the involuntary treatment criteria as a next step. I don't think it's a next step at all. I think there's, resourcing existing organizations who are like stretched thin trying to provide individual support to people. I think the crisis stabilization unit, yes, is part of it. I think as much as we don't want people to end up in the jail because of whatever crisis they're in, like since they're there, advocating for more money for medication-assisted treatment in the jail is good. Thank you for being part of that. But being able to swoop more people up seems like it's like being able to shove more people onto a path that we haven't even built. It doesn't go anywhere, hardly. And I still don't see how that's helpful. I would still not support this in 10 years once we've hopefully built that path, but it wouldn't seem so disastrous.
Okay, Mike.
Well, I mean, while I appreciate what you're saying, I didn't see that kind of hesitancy when we were talking about bail reform or about the HALT Act. It was do it and then we'll figure it out later. And I think in this case, we've lost a generation. I mean, 35 years since we closed the mental hospital. Well, they were institutions then. We'll call them institutions because that's what they were. And now hopefully we can move on to something more akin to a hospital. And I don't want to lose this many more people. We just keep losing people. And you may say, oh, we're just going to be scooping them up and then what? Well, then what? Then we will have to take action as to the people that we're not putting them in jail. We're saying we're here to help you, and they may refuse. And then guess what? We may have to pick them up again, like my friend did with his daughter, and put her in rehab again, and do that 10 times until she finally does overdose and die. But that's what he had to do. I think that at some point you have to give people that choice, and we're not doing that right now. We're leaving them to their own devices with something that is going to just wipe them out.
Okay. Anybody else?
Just wrestling with some of contrasting the resolutions here and just thinking out loud, you know, if we accept that the primary barriers to adequate care are the chronic underfunding of community-based services, if there were some magic or progression toward developing community-based services.
Yeah, there's no magic.
You know, but are we still left with the same problem of taking the severely afflicted and getting them into those settings?
Yeah, I mean, my view is we don't have the tools right now.
Right.
You know,
and that's my point. Is it?
And I think a lot of the other things we absolutely need haven't been developed because there's no pathway. We haven't built the pathway because there isn't a way to get on the pathway. This would say there's a way to do it. Now you have to figure out how to build it and fund it and run it and everything else. Yeah, hard. Everything about this is hard. More comment? We ready to vote? No? Go ahead.
Why would you put people on a pathway before you build it? What happens to them in the meantime? They just all like jump.
Well, that's what we're doing now is we're just leaving them outside. And I find that unacceptable, that we're just saying, well, we don't have a toolbox, so we're not going to do anything. And
maybe that's we sitting in this room. I think maybe we sitting in this room could learn more from people who are on the streets, either because that's where they live, or
I think
people who are working with them.
spent a lot of time paying attention to what's happening out in the streets. I mean, I've certainly walked through the jungle. I've talked to people who are there. I've talked to service providers. We've heard from them here. We've certainly heard from parents whose children have been afflicted with drug addiction and mental health crises, and the frustration of there really isn't a good method to address the people that need the help the most. You know, if somebody's able to seek voluntary treatment and get the help, wonderful. But, you know, you look at Thomas Rath and you say, what about that is okay? You know, and aren't we just setting up a system where we're making a sort of free zone for drug dealers? And I don't like drug dealers. You know, they...
Wait a minute. Thomas Rath was kidnapped, brought to a house, and tortured and killed and some other stuff. And what does that have to do with observing someone who you decide they can't meet their basic needs? That was not part of that at all.
Was in the jungle for a long period of time, unable to stop using drugs. He tried several times, unsuccessfully. You know, and that was just the lifestyle. There was no pathway out of it for him.
But that didn't kill him. A person killed him.
Yes.
As far as we know.
Oh, no, you're absolutely right. But I look at the environment and I use him as an example because it's so horrid that this was hiding in plain sight, that there's this drug market and drug dealers, and we're setting it up that the drug dealers can operate. And we're really doing very little to do anything about it. You know, drug dealers, they depend on violence as part of their business model. They don't pay taxes, and they sell poison. And I would like us to take people out of that environment if we can.
Take the drug dealers out?
No.
What are we talking about?
I'm saying somebody who is addicted to drugs and unable to stop on their own, they do not have choice. I would like us to at least have the tools to do something to help them. That's what I'm talking about. And that's what the governor's talking about. We're going to disagree, Veronica.
I will save my energy for next Tuesday then.
Yes, we're going to have this debate all over again. Anything further? We ready to vote? All those in favor? All those opposed? Okay. And you're right, we're going to have it all over again next Tuesday. So, okay. and let's move on because I know the sheriff needs to go somewhere else. Let's go to the sheriff's report. On page 36. And Sheriff, welcome. And maybe we could start just with talking about page 33 of the agenda, the goals and priorities that were coming from county administration.
Yeah. Would you like me to go through those?
Well, if there's any in particular you want to highlight, I did have a couple questions and comments, but please jump in.
Yeah, the Civil Division Accreditation Program is an important one. As everybody knows, our jail has been accredited for a number of years through the Sheriff's Association. Recently, our road patrol was accredited through DCJS. The only outstanding one we'd like to receive that's left for us is the Civil Division. We're thinking that should go pretty quick and easy because a lot of the policies that dictate how we do things in the civil office go hand in hand with how we do things on road patrol and throughout the rest of the agency. Obviously, purchasing a boat, we weren't able to pull that off this budget year due to the situation we're in. We're still in dire needs of a boat patrol. We're going to try to get by with the one we have for this summer. But we're going to continue to seek out grant opportunities, donations, and see what we can do to make that an easier lift for all of us. Our transparency hub, I know you haven't seen anything come out on that recently, but believe me, it has been in the works. We meet constantly on that. The one we're doing now is on incidences and our responses. It's a very heavy lift, very data driven. So that one is taking us longer than some of the other ones. So we're hoping to have more action on that here very soon. Our care team research consortium, as you know, we partnered with a university professor in Rochester to help study that and see how we can build upon that program and share the results with other agencies statewide. That has not been approved by the state yet, but it's in the process. That should be coming anytime, and we'll be getting to work on that. Our bike patrol unit, that's something we started a couple years ago, but when we went through some staffing issues a while back, we didn't get to bring that to the level that we were hoping. Now that our staffing is better, we're hoping to see more of that out and about this summer in springtime. And, I'm excited about that because it really does bring a lot more community action and presence in areas. We're hoping to start that in the village of Lansing. Nursing coverage in the jail, we've been using one full-time nurse. That clearly wasn't adequate. We wanted to improve that. We have recently hired a part-time nurse on contract that's helping us out when our nurse is on vacation and when she's off. We've already seen huge benefits from that. And lastly, and probably least importantly, is the camera system in the jail. We just need a equipment upgrade in that area to help us out. So we'll be looking at that throughout the year.
Okay.
And I think that's it.
All right. I did have a comment on number 2, the obtained funding to purchase a new boat. I think that realistically, I think that probably needs to be a grant or donation. I don't see that. I think we're headed towards another very difficult budget season,
Right.
given what's happening in Washington. So as a
I agree with you, Rich, and I understand that. As you recall, we did have funding to cover half of it, but the other half is still a heavy lift because it is a very expensive item.
And I did have an underline here. If there's anything we can do to help with advocating to New York State on the MAT program, let us know. And then your department equity indicators. It seems like the research you're doing about the care team could be an equity indicator. And also what you have in your report later about the blue envelopes. I thought those are really good initiatives that would further equity in the community. But up to you what you want to designate there, but those kind of jumped out at me.
Yeah, I can say with that is something, the equity indicator with the care team study, we can certainly take that into consideration and discuss that with the professor that's helping us out with that, his research team. For sure, that is something I hadn't really considered, so I appreciate you providing that. The Blue Envelope program, that's something that came from the Sheriff's Association, and honestly, I've had kind of mixed reviews on that. Some people have seemed to appreciate that option, and others have kind of spoke out against it. and given me some insight that I haven't really thought of before. We still maintain the program. We have had several people come up and pick up envelopes or ask for us to mail them to them to make it easier. But I got to be honest, we have had some mixed reviews on that. So
Interesting. Okay.
yeah.
Okay. The only other comment I had on your report was congratulations on the letter from Department of Motor Vehicles on your program. I thought it was kind of a dour letter, though, Jen. I expected them to be a little bit more celebratory. But I guess,
It's a generic letter that they send to every county. It came a little late this year. We have to submit our plan, usually around November of the year prior. We usually get approval by January, late December, early January, but the state's a little behind in approving it. I look forward to continuing to advance the Stop DWI program, and it's self-sufficient at this point, which is the main thing.
Okay. I guess yes is yes, so that's good. But and then before we get to the resolution, any questions or comments on the sheriff's report? Lee.
Remind me, Derek, the boat, $70,000 is what you were looking at back at the budget season.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Jim, I think it was pushing 80. Was it not? Yeah. Yeah, it was about $80,000.
And that's half, or that's the whole?
No, that would be the total, and we had funding for approximately half of it.
Okay, so you're looking for 35 to 40.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And the second question, the care team, is there a parallel running in the city?
The city has their own care team, but my understanding is slightly different than our team, where they don't have a dedicated officer assigned to it. They rotate and provide whoever's available at the time. They do have a dedicated mental health clinician, who I believe may be out on leave right now, maternity leave, or will be shortly. Not sure on that. So they may be down for a little bit.
Okay.
Should we be encouraging them to dedicate some more resources in that direction, the city?
That would seem to be a sensible thing, given the benefits that have come out of the care team running at the county level. Yes.
Yeah, I think, unfortunately, I think their staffing levels are still, they're pretty shorthanded, so they may not be able to at this point.
Okay. All right. Anything else? We have.
If I could, I did have one more thing, Rich. If I could just add, we talked about our building upgrades, which I really appreciate. I was in full support of raise the age. I understand we don't want younger teenagers in our jail facility. But as you know, with raise the age, the state provided no ability for us to house them anywhere. And we run into this problem continually. We just had another juvenile that we had to hold in our investigatory interview room for 11 days. It resulted in one of my deputies getting severely assaulted, 8 stitches to her face, because we have no ability to keep control of these people when they're violent. It's a very bad situation, and not to mention the overtime was through the roof. We ended up having to put 2 deputies on 1 child. And I say child because of their age, but some of these young men come as full-sized adults and pretty violent at times too. So I'm hoping that, when we do discuss facility upgrades, if the state doesn't step up, and they haven't done it for a number of years now, that we can design a space where we can better hold these juveniles. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Yeah. I respond with a comment from NISAC, which was, there was a gentleman at the Public Safety Committee who runs one of these specialized secure detention facilities. And he said he currently had 35 youth. 17 of them are there on homicides, and the rest are on very serious violent crimes. This is not a typical slice of youth in New York State. Every story is a tragedy, but yeah, if they're there, there's generally a pretty good reason.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
All right, we have a resolution, but anything else on the report first? All right, so we have Sheriff's Office authorization to take title of flock safety equipment for New York State right-of-ways, Doc ID 13112. Could I get a motion? Veronica moves, Lee seconds. Sheriff, do you want to give us 2 sentences on this?
Sure. Yeah, as you know, we've had a heck of a time in the county installing these LPR devices, license plate readers. Everything in the city, including the ones that are on our contract, I think are installed or pretty much near being installed, but we're still lagging behind out in the county areas. The big reason is on our state highways. We had a problem with New York State DOT authorizing permits. They finally agreed to allow us to install these devices with the caveat that the devices switch ownership from flock safety to the actual law enforcement entity, meaning the Sheriff's Office in Tompkins County. So this resolution is simply approving that transfer of ownership. If this program ever goes away, we have to give the equipment back. There's an addendum to the contract that will have to be signed, selling the equipment back to them for, I believe, $1 or something like that. So this is finally a step in the right direction and hoping to get these installed at least on the state highways.
Okay, questions, comments? Veronica.
Yeah, comment on, I have no problem with this resolution, but I am, I guess, still or more concerned about the data security and privacy implications with the flock company and automatic license plate readers in general. I know that you, like the Sheriff's Office and the county, have no intention to leak unnecessary information or do anything untoward with them. But at the same time, there's a lawsuit right now, not against flock, so it might not affect anything, but against the city of Norfolk surrounding the potential privacy violations involved in installing these same, I guess I don't know if it's these same cameras, but cameras with the same like data system with the same company. And I am wondering if before it all gets deployed, if we can look more closely at what is in the contract between us and Flock and what guardrails can we put to sort of keep as much local control over the use, the data, anything that we can. This particular resolution about the title for the cameras, and in fact, like you having the title while they're up, that's fine, no problems with that. But I thought I'd bring this up in conjunction.
Veronica, I think the protections are there, but I have no problem at all. Let's have a discussion about it and review what those protections are at our next meeting.
That sounds good. Thank you.
Okay.
I can work on something on that to bring to you too.
Yes, please. Let's plan on that for next meeting. Brittany?
Surprise.
Surprise. Okay. Yes. Okay. Anything further on the resolution? Are we ready to vote? All those in favor? That's unanimous. Great. Anything further, Sheriff?
No, I'm good. I have to get off. I apologize. We have a retirement in our corrections division, and we're preparing to do a walkout ceremony for a CO that's, done corrections work for 25 years. So I apologize. It fell on the same date as the public safety meeting, but I appreciate you.
That's okay. Thanks for visiting with us. Okay. Next up is Department of Emergency Response. And I see we've got some guests. Let's see. There's Jessica and Michael, and I thought Joe was on there somewhere. Anybody else? Danielle. Okay. Welcome, everybody. And again, why don't we start out by talking a little bit about your department goals that are shown in the county administration report on page 31.
Absolutely. Is there any particular area you want me to start with, Rich, or just sort of do a highlight? I mean, you can see they're rather robust for the year. Some of them started last year, and some of them were able to wrap up at the beginning of this year. So is there any particular way you'd like me to start?
I had some stuff highlighted I had questions on, but if there's anything in particular you'd like to talk about, you don't have to read them all to us, but where do you see real emphasis this year?
Certainly the comprehensive emergency management plan, and if you'd like additional information on that, I'll let Jess speak to that because that's her project. Our EMS program and the future of EMS in the county, I think, as you and the rest of the committee discussed earlier, is a major priority for our team right now, as everything is on this list, but those are certainly I think, our two highest priorities. The backup center, we've moved our team back on February 12th back into Brown Road. And the team really likes it, and we're really pleased with the work that we're able to get done.
Okay. Certainly, if any of the committee members haven't seen it, they didn't get to the open house, it's worth going and taking a look. It's really impressive.
Thank you.
On the EMS program, CON is Certificate of Need. Is that the acronym?
Yes. I'll let Joe speak a little bit about this, but just to give you a high-level overview. This was something that was recommended that we pursue by a state when we met with the state, but also this speaks to some of the changes in the law that will allow for billing. We're not capable of billing right now because we don't have a CON. So when they finally operationalize and provide some guidance on how we can bill for treat and releases, that would give us the opportunity to do that. But I'll let Joe just elaborate on it.
Yeah, so there's two basic types of municipal CONs. One is for a style of EMS similar to what we have now with rapid response vehicles. One is for transport ambulances. The way the municipal CON process works is once the resolution has passed and we get a letter of support from the county, we would send our application off to the Bureau of EMS. They would go through the application, either grant or deny it, or request further information. We then have 2 years to be able to prove our need in Tompkins County. If a not-for-profit or a private organization were to apply for a CON, they would have to prove that need right up front. But with a municipal CON, we get to operate for 2 years to be able to build that proof of need.
Okay. All right.
What are you submitting the CON for specifically, transport or ALS?
So that is something that we would have to discuss with the committee and the legislature as a whole to see what the county is interested in, but we could submit for either one of the two. If we did submit for an ambulance, and we could still utilize fly car vehicles for our service as well.
But Lee, I think it's important to note that that is not our intention right now. Our intention, if anything, would be to grow the RMR program. But as you know, I know you're aware that, depending on where the conversation goes with EMS, having the county possess a county CON certainly does provide us, I think, it sets us up quite nicely. But right now, it would really just be for the expansion of the RMR program to allow us to bill and perhaps convert one of them to an ALS unit. But I think it's really important to note here that, just based on what everybody was speaking about earlier, we are really starting to see a crunch here with regards to our EMS capacity in the county. It does concern me quite a bit. And frankly, until we're able to really solve the problem, the county holds a great deal of liability. And part of that liability comes from us not being able to source ambulances when we need them. In this month's TomStat report, I shared an article about a neighboring county and an agency in a neighboring county that took a rather bold step. They have since rescinded what's in that article, but it was because of public pressure. But quite frankly, we could be in this very same position here in the county. And frankly, there's been some conversation about this very thing in this county over the last month. So I think it's really important that, if nothing else, that our department and the county is position ourselves to be in a position that if we need to do more, we can. The application for a CON is lengthy and it takes some time. And I'd hate for us to have to try to do that if we're put into a position where we have to.
Okay. That's going to be an ongoing discussion. I think there's a lot to understand and learn there. So I look forward to that. I did have, going back to the CEMP, the Comprehensive Emergency Management Plan, is that on time at present? And what is the timeline to finish before August? Is that anticipated?
Slated to be finished before August. We actually have a meeting coming up in March. I don't know the exact date off the top of my head, to meet with our kickoff meeting with initial stakeholders for that update. Tetra Tech will be running that meeting as our consultant who's writing the plan. But so far, they're on track to get it done.
Okay. That was all I was curious about. Number 8, do you have a sense of price? Because it does seem like this is having a fire training center would be a really positive thing to have one that could be countywide and updated to meet current requirements. How much would that cost? Just, do you know, generally?
It could cost anywhere from $750,000 to $2 to $3 million. It depends on what we actually decide to do. And likely it would depend on how much airport FAA could be able to kick in. When we initially started these talks with Josh and the airport, they were looking at some potential revenue coming in if they could bring in some of their FAA training to Ithaca rather than sending people out, and they would be bringing people in to do the training. So that would kind of help offset the cost, but it's still in the initial stages where we need support for it. Bottom line is we have well over 500 volunteer fire service personnel that currently have woefully inadequate training space.
Yeah. Is this something where there's available grant money?
Potentially.
Okay.
It depends on the grant. Most of the grants that we receive are not anywhere near enough to fund a facility like that, even when you combine them.
Okay. I'd be interested in hearing more. I don't know if other committee members are, but if there's a plan developing, I'd like to see where that's going, because I think that would be a really good thing to try to accomplish.
Absolutely. And it would have a huge benefit to the volunteer community, and that's something else that Lee referenced earlier. This is something that the volunteer community has really asked for over the last several years, and I think if nothing else, it just allows us to begin that process and the planning phase, but this is something that they're really asking for.
We've also explored the possibility with this being a primarily fire training space. I know the airport was looking at funding related to EOC space. It could be multi-use, and we could use this as a larger, much more functional EOC space as opposed to our conference room that we realize is probably much smaller than we actually need. So there's a multi-use component to it, which could help in terms of grant funding.
Okay, thanks. The fire paging system, and I was just confused. What is that compared to our other communication systems?
Yes, that's a standalone system that we use to alert all of our fire and EMS departments in the county. So it's tied into our radio system, but it's a standalone system, and we didn't have the funding to do it as part of the backup center in our radio upgrade, but we believe we have the money for that program. So we're going to be working on that this year.
Okay.
And I think, Lee, correct me if I'm wrong, that the majority of that system probably goes back to 2008, correct? When you guys did the upgrade back then? Does that sound about right?
Actually, I think we rolled it out a year or two ahead of the 800 system, but yeah, 2006, 7, 8.
Yeah. So, so what we've been doing over the last couple of years is, we make some repairs, but what it doesn't, our current system doesn't allow us to do is have redundancy in the event we have an issue at Brown Road. So in the event that we would have another outage here, we would be able to page from Pine Tree, which we can't currently do. So this would add some much needed redundancy in our paging system. Okay.
And then, I just had a comment on the department equity indicators in number 2. It might make sense to add the homeless encampments as one of the areas we're looking for response time and accessibility, because I think that's a real concern, that it's very hard to reach those people. Anything else on the departmental goals from committee members? I was hoping to get you to comment on the comment we had from James Smith in public comment on the codes for EMS in the city. Is there anything we should be doing on the county level to try to encourage a consistent approach here? It sounds like those codes have changed in a way that we're not getting EMS responses where they might be appropriate in the city.
Yeah, so, obviously, Mr. Smith talked about various issues in his public comment. I will tell you that we do have an agreement with Bangs that in the event they need assistance in the city, especially with lift assistance, and they can certainly call our RMR program. That's something that we've worked out with them at our last meeting. We do meet with Bangs every month, so they're aware that they can call us if they need us, but obviously during the hours of operation. I think there would be an opportunity for us to maybe provide a review of one of the reasons why we started the RMR program, because this issue isn't just specific in the city. Many of the fire departments don't answer many of the medical calls. That's why we started the RMR program. So it's not just isolated to the city. And I think that this really speaks to the capacity issue that we have with volunteerism, with EMS in the county, and how we're trying to really work with our community agencies to change how they respond. At our last fire chiefs meeting, this very topic took up most of our meeting. And there's a lot of concern from the volunteer fire services, for example, about having to answer more calls than they're currently answering, and thinking that they don't have the capacity. And they are specifically asking the county to do more. They like us to extend our hours, maybe consider going into the weekends, because they just don't have the capacity or the trained staff to do it. As far as what's happening in the city, I think there's opportunity for discussion there. I have brought this up with both Bangs and the fire chief, and I think that they're working to resolve that. And I've also spoken to city officials about it.
Okay. I see we're getting crunched on time, but I'd like to give these subjects more attention maybe next meeting. But I'm wondering if there's any conversation we should be having with the city to try to make sure all those codes are rationalized. I don't know, but I think that's a much longer conversation. Yeah. But before we leave the Department of Emergency Response, I did want to just note the recognition on page 55 of Derek Ashley, Kim Beckley, Kevin Morse Jr., Robin Wishna, and Corey Ike. They saved lives. That's really exciting and great. Good job.
Thank you. And Rich, I just want to point out that some of those folks are from Newfield Fire Department that worked in partnership with our team. So I just want to make sure that, I'm sorry, Enfield Fire Department. So I just want to make sure that they get recognized.
Yeah. Okay. And I see the documents on critical incident stress management team. This was a subject that really came up at NISAC at Public Safety, just how this issue has grown in the first responder community and how we need to do things to address it. So it's really good that something's going on here. Yeah. Other committee members.
We're proud to be ahead of the curve on this.
Yeah. Other committee members, do you have anything for Dewar? Okay. And I apologize for going too fast. Anything further from Dewar? Anything you want to tell us about? Okay. Let's keep moving then. Who's up next? I believe it's, oh, you have a resolution. Or no, this is.
That's probation.
Probation. Okay, sorry. Let's go to the district attorney. Next up. I see I skipped the district attorney. There was no page in the report for that. Matt, sorry about that.
Oh, no worries.
Why don't we at least have a little conversation about your priorities on page 32? And
sure.
And I see you made some comment about the legislature and support. We certainly want to be supportive of the DA's office, but maybe we can agree to disagree on the extent of that. I don't know, but I'd like to hear you out.
Sure. Well, I mean, I think, you know, that goes back, and it's something that goes from top to the bottom of our department. We feel that. So whether you agree with me or not, that's our perception and that's our feeling. So all of our goals really are center on our ability to be fully staffed, and we are not. We're short 2 attorneys. And talking to some of my co-DAs from across the state, one of them commented to me, well, the only reason why you guys are able to stay afloat is because me, meaning the DA personally, I have a full caseload, and I handle most of the major felony cases and work 7 days a week. But we cannot continue short 2 attorneys for much longer without some tangible consequences. And some of that relates to going back to the cap debate that went from last year. So that's really all I have to say about that. I'm happy to answer questions.
Yeah, I mean, certainly we've established the positions and we've funded them. It does seem like there's a recruitment issue, and maybe there's further things we could talk about in terms of salary levels or something else. But I think the next step there would be for you to come talk to us with a definite proposal.
Well, I can say that HR has been really helpful, and they're working closely. I'm working closely with them, and I have a meeting with Ruby tomorrow, actually. So, we're working on it.
Okay. All right. Anything from any of the other committee members? All right. Anything further, Matt?
I'm all set. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks. Next up is Probation and Community Justice. And I see Dan is here. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
And why don't we start out by talking about your goals, and I think we're on page 33, is it? Yes.
I believe so. Trying to bring it up here. So the first goal we identified was to further embed the principles of procedural justice into the practices of the probation department. I think we've increased our transparency with the data dashboard. We've changed some of our practices so that we're screening clients anonymously through our enhanced supervision and sentencing options committee to take away any identifiable factors, name, demographic information, trying to increase our impartiality in our recommendations. And I believe it was 2 years ago we started exit interviews with people. Of course, they're voluntary because people are off probation by the time they're receiving them, so they're not required to submit it. Trying to take that feedback from clients as far as what worked and what didn't work. Engage in collaborations with community partners to enhance accessibility to community resources for probation clients in the areas of education, employment, substance abuse treatment, housing, and mental health, the factors that we talk about all the time. Continue to work collaboratively with law enforcement partners toward the goal of reducing crimes and gun-related violence in Tompkins County through the GIVE program. Working with human resources to upgrade or update our civil service job descriptions to reflect the current New York State minimum training expectations. Now that we're sending people to a basic course for peace officer, people should know that that's an expectation when they're taking the exam, because it is fairly rigorous. Both of the people that we've sent so far have sustained some level of injury or another as part of that training process.
Okay.
So make sure that people are aware of the physical fitness requirements that are now required.
Yeah. I did have a question on the next one, the buy into the New York State LRS 25-year retirement option. What is that, and is this an extra?
This This is something that we haven't done in the past. I've spoken about it with county administration a little bit in the last year or so. So with Tier 5 and Tier 6 across the state, probation departments are finding it harder and harder to recruit people. Some of that relates back to the training requirements, education requirements, and also the fact that with Tier 6, you have to work a lot longer than if you entered into this profession as a Tier 4 and worked for 30 years. You'd be able to retire with a full pension at age, roughly in your late 50s, early 60s. Now it's a minimum you're going to be in your early 60s, although they want to recruit people who are in their early 20s and physically fit enough to do basically a police style municipal police training council academy. So you're asking people really to work for 40 years in a difficult profession. I know everyone, again, ages differently, but we're losing potential probation officers to other professions, that, including corrections and police work, where they are afforded a 20 or 25-year retirement. So it has become a disincentive to enter the probation profession.
So Dan, if I can just interrupt. So what this would do is it's an added cost, but allows you to offer retirement at 25 years.
So
is that what it is?
It is a cost to the county. The county would have to buy into this. It's basically retirement law 89T has allowed counties to have a 25-year retirement for probation officers since 1999, I believe, but the counties all had to buy it. So we've looked into what the cost would be for the county, and it is a substantial buy-in of around $580,000 to.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And then it's a sustained, I believe, close to $80,000 a year investment after that. So it may not be with something fiscally available to us, given the, constraints concerns that you mentioned before about this may be a difficult year, but it's something that I think is going to need to be looked at, perhaps when financial situation is stronger, because other counties are buying into it. There was a push from COPA to have the state just grant it to everyone, to all counties. That's fallen on deaf ears. So now counties are taking it upon themselves one by one to buy in for their people. And I believe at least 3 counties have done so in the last couple of months. I know Otsego and Weber County both have. So.
All right. Well, let me interrupt you because we're running out of time. Sorry.
I'm sorry.
But that it does sound like something that you should come back and talk to us about some more. Certainly when you have some specific numbers of what that would cost. It'd be interesting to see. But let me open it up to my colleagues. Any questions or comments for Dan on the priorities for 25? Okay. Seeing none, I see you have a resolution, but is there anything else you wanted to tell us about first?
Quickly, our equity indicator, it's sort of the elephant in the room for probation. For many, many years, we've had disproportionate negative outcomes for people of color, and I think it's something that we need to explore and look for causal factors as well as potential remedies to that situation.
I think that's a great undertaking, a difficult one, but an important one. So love to hear more about that too. Why don't we proceed to your resolution? And this is reappropriation of pretrial grant for benefit of the pretrial program of Tompkins County, Doc ID 13107. Could I get a motion? Veronica moves, Mike seconds. You want to give us a couple sentences on this? This is essentially rollover, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. Any questions, comments? Are we ready to vote? All those in favor? That's unanimous. Thanks. All right. Anything else, Dan?
Just wanted to remind people we do have a DWI victim impact panel scheduled for March 19th at the county courthouse from 6:30 to 9:30 if anyone would like to attend.
Okay. Certainly I've gone to it. It is a powerful program. So thanks.
Thank you.
And if you could send us a reminder closer to the date, please just send out an email.
I will do that.
All right. And then I believe we are up to assigned counsel program report. Lance, welcome.
Hello, everybody. I'll be real quick. I can see the time. I know people will want to get out of here or out of there. Nothing, you see our monthly court stats, just briefly on that, nothing unusual there. To draw any concern, 1 month is hard to, really fit in anything. January numbers can sometimes be a little higher as a residue of the holiday season in December. We see that week 2 or week 3, our numbers oftentimes pop, which is an indicator of people over the holidays, Christmas, New Year's, things happened, and they come visit us, so to speak. A polite way to put it. But nothing, that jumps out saying, oh my God, what's going on, and of course, 1 month, numbers can bounce a little. So nothing of any concern for us there. Jumping over to our goals and equity indicators. One thing, our main goals you'll see are we focus on, we highlight our grant work and our reimbursement work. The 18B work is always a priority for us. That keeps, we get a significant amount of state money that helps offset our budget costs. In the reimbursement, the 18B reimbursements, we prioritize those just given the financial realities. And we're focused on a lot of data collection analysis, kind of do system reviews. And then we have ongoing, our work is always working on the attorney panel, not only numbers, but quality, training, and supports to them to keep the quality of the work up is kind of the other thing there. We have, see, one of our big goals is improving client aspect discovery review in the jail. Circling back with Captain Harrison, we started those Captain Bunce last year, and then he asked us to wait. They were implementing a new tablet system there. Now that that's, now that they're kind of settled with that, then we can come back to them. I think the concept is going to be setting up cloud-based storage of our discovery, and the clients can access it through their tablets. That'll save a lot of attorney time, which will have some indirect cost savings for us on our 1171 line on that. The only other thing on the equity indicators, our number one is actually, I think there was a collation mistake. That's actually DERs in equity indicators. The second one is ours. Our first one was actually, I can read it to you real quickly, was just to track client case results by demographics in courts to identify potential impact and concern points in our efforts to assure fair and equitable processes and the justice system to our clients and the community.
Okay.
I can email that to everyone so you see it if that in follow up if there are questions.
Yeah, no, you're right. The doer should have their equity indicator. I was curious, Lance, and we're over time, so I don't want to go on too long, but it seems like you have some fairly expansive goals for software systems in 25.
That, and I should say that'll all be covered by our grant money. We have state grant money covers all of those costs.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's no cost to the county in that regard. We're careful in that regard.
And that includes the discovery review by clients in Tompkins County Jail?
Yeah.
Okay.
That, what we're looking at basically briefly, cloud-based storage, that'll be covered. You're going to see the contract coming through, you'll have to approve. And that'll all be covered. There may be some software systems, to utilize analysis, all covered by grant money.
Okay, thank you. Anything further from other committee members? Questions for Lance? Looks like we're all good. Thanks for sharing with us. Anything further from you?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Thanks.
Any other business to come before the Public Safety Committee? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. So moved, seconded. All those in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.